There's been a huge uptick in anti-Semitism. When it came to the hostages, 240 plus taken, and for people then to rip up the photos of those just is beyond the belief of Jewish people here in Ireland. We couldn't imagine that being done to any other hostages from any other ethnicity, any other religion, from any other country. And why would this be done? It's just incredible.
Schools and universities in Dublin have told me that they've been on the receiving end of anti-Semitic comments, sometimes very aggressive and threatening. We haven't seen any physical attacks against Jews, and we're very grateful for that. But many Jews feel concerned, they feel anxious, they don't want to go out in public with signs of their Jewish identity. And we have increased security across all our Jewish communal institutions.
From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free.
When you hear chants from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, that basically means the elimination of 10 million people in Israel, 8 million of whom are Jewish people. And we feel that that is a very anti-Semitic chant which leads to murderous conclusions.
Palestine will be free.
The Jewish community recognise that when people march in a pro-Palestinian rally, then they are targeting Israel, they are complaining against Israel, they are objecting to Israel's policy, and that is not directly targeted against the Jewish community. But as I've said, listening to that type of rhetoric and seeing the difference in that rhetoric aimed towards the Jewish state and the rhetoric in which other conflicts and wars are spoken about, current or in history, is noticed by the Jewish population in Ireland and across the world.
One has to define anti-Semitism, which isn't always easy to do. Most Western countries define it under the IHRA, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. It's only a one-page document, but it'll be things like Holocaust denial. But also, more interesting to the current situation, is anti-Semitism is also criticism of Israel that is not directed at other countries doing the same thing. Now, what is not anti-Semitism is criticizing Israel or its actions, or the actions of the government itself. Everybody's allowed to criticize any government. But there is a fine line, and it's not always easy to distinguish it.
The Jewish community shares the same concerns as all people here in Ireland and people across the world when they see the horrific scenes coming out from Gaza of the civilian casualties. But for most people in the Jewish community, the overwhelming feeling is that these civilian casualties are the direct responsibility of Hamas for embedding themselves in the civilian population. The loss of civilian life is a huge tragedy, but that is something that occurs in all wars across the world. But the way that the war is being spoken about in Israel, as if Israel are purposely targeting civilians, and the difference between that narrative and the way other conflicts are described, that is felt by people in the Jewish community, and it makes them wonder, why is the language and the narrative so different when it comes to this than when it comes to other incidents and wars and conflicts across the world?
Meanwhile, from many parts of Europe, the long trek of the displaced persons goes on. Refugee ships carrying illegal immigrants continue their efforts to run the blockade and reach Cyprus. But for the future, only the United Nations can decide.
One of the things that people, which to me is the nub of the problem, don't quite understand, that if we go back just to 1948, the situation with Palestinian refugees is different to any other refugee situation. Refugee status, unfortunately, is part of humanity. There's wars and we've got refugees, but they're handled and they can be handled. The one that isn't handled correctly is the Palestinian refugees. Palestinian refugee status started in 1948 with around 720,000 refugees. There's now 5.5 million refugees, Palestinian refugees. So that's the first thing that needs to be understood and needs to be changed. The next thing is the right of return. Most refugee situations don't give people the right of return to the lands that they left. If that was the case, I'd be going back to Eastern Europe. And when those refugees are in Syria and Lebanon and Jordan, I should say, as well, they are not absorbed into the community. They're kept down. They can't work at many jobs. So the situation is solvable, but it needs a lot of countries to change the attitude. The big problem, in my opinion, is the fact that the Palestinian refugees are treated totally different to any other refugee situation.